Yes.
On top of what
Rabbi Taz, thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, goodness. I think it's my second sigh today. I've got to, maybe I needed another cup of coffee.
Lori and I got our second vaccine yesterday. She took it harder than I did.
Yay. Hey, I know after you've had your second, are they effective immediately, or does it take like a couple of days for the coverage?
Well, up to 3 weeks.
Yeah,
Nobody really knows the answer to those questions because nobody's ever studied a virus like this before.
because they have these reports now coming out that someone had their second vaccine, but they still got sick. And it's like, well, just because you had it doesn't mean immediately that it takes effect. It takes some time, right?
Yeah, well, it's 95% effective after 3 weeks or so.
After 3 weeks.
Yeah.
we get ours on Thursday.
First one or second one?
First or second?
Second.
Good for you. Good for you. I'm hearing from people that are talking about it. Barbara's got it as well. Yoni will tell you my article for the bulletin is I'm not going to miss my shot.
That's what we were singing all the way down to Colorado Springs on Saturday.
So I put some words on it, and hopefully Lin-Manuel Miranda won't be too upset with me.
It's amazing how much effort people put in to get on the schedule someplace and how far they'll drive.
Oh, I have some person just told me they're going to be driving down to Colorado Springs.
We did.
That's where you got yours.
Yeah, and my brother and sister-in-law flew from Phoenix to here to get their first shot, and they're going to fly in again on in about a couple weeks. So, yeah, they flew in from Phoenix.
I know a couple of people, but they live here, but so does your brother. I mean, they just have homes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's amazing. People, if you have the opportunity to, but I don't know when I'll get ours.
I don't know if you need to be quarantined if you fly in someplace though, because the shot doesn't work right away. Still have to work. They're saying they won't give us a time when it'll be safe not to wear a mask anymore.
That's not going to happen for a while.
Yeah.
A long
There
while.
are too many people who aren't vaccinated that you still need to wear that mask.
No,
I don't recognize so many people. If you don't remember their voice exactly, everyone's got a mask on. I can't remember who they are.
Well, that's the nice part about Zooming.
Right.
We don't have to wear masks.
Exactly. You don't know if they're smiling at you or baring their teeth, right? So
yeah.
Well, let's go ahead and I'm grateful to see each and every one of you, and Janet and Arnie and Wendy, and I know Lori's coming on eventually. So good to see you guys. If we're going to be doing Parashat Mishpatim, which in many ways is a complement to what we had in Yitro. There are laws that are given, but not the grand rubrics of the 10 Commandments. Last week with Yitro, chapter 20, we had these rubrics that under which all the other commandments would fit. But in Mishpatim, there's some 50 plus mitzvot d'oraita, or commandments that come from the Torah that are given. Some of them are of extraordinary importance, dealing with moral and ethical behavior. Interestingly, and I'm not going to do it this year, but maybe in subsequent years, the first 10 of these commandments deal with slavery. And unlike some of the earlier law codes, like the Hammurabi Code, etc., where the laws dealing with treatment of slaves, etc., came almost like as an addendum to the main body. In the Torah, these are the first ones, right after the 10 Commandments, 10 laws of how to treat fairly, compassionately those who are enslaved. Now, there's some difference between those who are slaves of your kin those who are Hebrews who are slaves. And we have to differentiate between what we understand as slaves of manumission when it came to those who were treated somewhat less than human. In those days, there were a lot of, you were enslaved, sometimes because of military conquest and sometimes because of economic disadvantage, and you were in debt. And so you survived by selling yourself to someone, but there was a limit to how long you could sell yourself for someone. So they're fascinating passages in this week's Torah portion, but I'm not going to focus on those. I want to focus on something else. So you'll have to tune in next year or read it on your own. So we're going to be looking at chapter 24 in the book of Exodus, because I find this is another one of those passages which is so wildly different. It's another passage that deals with the phenomena of revelation. What the heck actually happened? What did they see? What did they hear? Who saw it? And in what way? And as we read the Torah, you can see that the commentators themselves are not really sure how to unpack all of this, because was the revelation on the 6th day of Sivan, on the 7th day of Sivan? Was it just Moses who had the revelation? And when did he have this revelation? Because now they're talking about this revelation now and the giving of the laws now. Well, what happened last week with Yitro? And so that's one of those passages where they said, no, this passage that we're reading in chapter 24 actually preceded what we read last week in chapter 20. As the Talmud says, there's not a early or a later in the Torah. It's not written in chronological order, but that's fine for them to say that, but we have it in these orders, and to try to figure out in what order it came. And now, of course, we read it from a perspective, are they simply weaving in different traditions? Anyway, so there's a lot to look at in these, I think, 18 verses of chapter 24. Fabulous. So that's what I wanted to look at, and I hope you find it fascinating too. So let's say a little bracha. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kedeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot Torah. Praised are you, Adonai, our God, creator of the universe, who've sanctified us with mitzvot, commanded us to engage with the words of Torah. So I'm going to bring up the passage, and I'm going to employ the Markman rule again. I don't know if there we go. Good. Is that large enough? Maybe I can get one more in. Hold on. Look at that. So I want to read it.
That's good.
Yeah, thank you. I want to read it first. You guys, we'll have someone to read it, and as we read it, maybe take little notes or mental notes or physical notes to say, that's something that calls out Darshani, interpret me. That's a question. This is a koshi. This is an interesting difficulty. So if I could have a volunteer to read, Alan, I don't want to always pin it on you, but you're a good place to start, buddy.
Okay, here I go. Then he said to Moses, come up to Adonai with Aaron, Nadav, and Avihu, and 70 elders of Israel, and bow low from afar. Moses alone shall come near Adonai, but the others shall not come near, nor shall the people come up with him. Moses went and repeated to the people all the commands of Adonai and all the rules, and all the people answered with one voice, saying, all the things Adonai has commanded, we will do. Moses then wrote down all the commands of Adonai. Early in the morning, he set up an altar at the foot of the mountain with 12 pillars for the 12 tribes of Israel. He designated some young men among the Israelites, and they offered burnt offerings and sacrificed bulls as offerings of well-being to Adonai. Moses took one part of the blood and put it in his basin, and the other part of the blood he dashed against the altar. Then he took the record of the covenant and read it aloud to the people, and they said, all that Adonai has spoken, we will faithfully do. Moses took the blood and dashed it on the people and said, this is the blood of the covenant that Adonai now makes with you concerning all these commands. Then Moses and Aaron, Nadav and Avihu, and 70 elders of Israel ascended, and they saw the God of Israel under his feet. There was the likeness of a pavement of sapphire, like the very sky for purity. Yet he did not raise his hand against the leaders of the Israelites. They beheld God, and they ate and drank. Adonai said to Moses, "Come up to me on the mountain and wait there, and I will give you the stone tablets with the teachings and commandments which I inscribed to instruct them." So Moses and his attendants Joshua arose, and Moses ascended the mountain of God. To the elders he had said, "Wait here for us until we return to you. You have Aaron and Hur with you. Let anyone who has a legal matter approach them." When Moses had ascended the mountain, the cloud covered the mountain. The presence of Adonai abode on Mount Sinai, and the cloud hid it for 6 days. On the seventh day, he called to Moses from the midst of the cloud. Now the presence of Adonai appeared in the sight of the Israelites as a consuming fire on the top of the mountain. Moses went inside the cloud and ascended the mountain, and Moses remained on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights.
Right. Now, as you read this carefully, thank you, Alan. As you read this carefully, it's all over the place. I mean, because we have, I don't want to steal what you had, so I'm going to ask you first. What you noticed that says Darshani, that we need to interpret this. But it seems like the story that the narrative that we have here in this, 18 verses of chapter 24, that it's going back and forth and back and forth. So what are some of the things that you noticed? And then we'll see, I collected a whole bunch of commentary from, from different sources, Talmud and Midrashim, as well as some of the classic commentators as well. So who would like to share? What are some of the things that you looked at just in this first couple of paragraphs?
The divided blood.
The divided blood?
Yeah, I don't know what it means, but it made me think it was calling out for interpretation. Why half on the altar and then on the people?
Okay. So why, that they use blood for two different purposes. One is for the altar, one for the people. Okay, that's one thing. What else? Who was the one who was designated to make those offerings? Look up verse 5.
The young men.
The young men, right? They're not designated, but what's the significance of that? So that there's that. Let's look down here. Of course, verse 10 is one that you could spend semesters and semesters studying. What do you mean they saw the God of Israel? And that under his feet there was some kind of pavement like sapphire. What the heck is that all about, right? Yeah. And especially since we can't see God, but they said they sort of did see God. How do our ancestors understand that? What's implied here? And that they not only saw, but they were able to have some kind of communal meal, a festal meal as a part of it, the elders. And then after that experience, the very next verse, then it says to Adonai and to Moses, Adonai says to Moses, "Come on up and I'll give you the tablets." Well, didn't we already have those tablets? Right? And what were you talking about? Let's see. Also, where was it with the 12 stones? Get that too. All right, up here, verse 4. So, verse 4, he wrote down all the commandments, wrote them on the 12 pillars for the 12 tribes of Israel. Now, did he write the 10 commandments on 12 pillars? What exactly did he write? Did he write the commandments that we just have in this week's Torah portion? What exactly was written on those 12 pillars? So in verse 4, he said, Moses already wrote down all the commandments, and he wrote them on 12 pillars. Just a few verses later, God says, "Come up here, I'll give you some stone tablets." So it's a passage that's filled with things that are snippets. And it's one thing to say, well, there's not an earlier, there's not a later, there's not a chronological in the Torah portion, in the reading of the Torah, because what was read in Yitro did not necessarily come before what we read in Mishpatim. But we're talking about just a couple of verses later. We had from Moses writing down all the commandments on these pillars, and then God saying, come on up here, I'll give you the commandments. Well, so there's a lot to unpack here, and our ancestors did. So before we look at some of theirs, as you read through these just this translation, what are some of the things that this is our ancestral literature? This is the real stuff. I mean, this is our revelatory experience. It's yours. So what do you make of your possession? What is this for you as you read it before the commentary? Jerry, go ahead.
Yeah, well, it says that he wrote down all the commandments on those pillars, and then he told Moses to come and get them and give them out. So
Moses wrote.
it sounds like the entire Torah was on those pillars.
It could be, but it was Moses who wrote the pillars, right? Going back, let me get back to it again. I'll just show you. But verse 4, Moses wrote down, verse 4, Moses wrote down all these commandments, you see? And he set them up on as an altar with 12 pillars for the 12 tribes. So it's not necessarily that on each of the pillars are some of the commandments. He could have just written out the commandments, in what form we don't know. And the 12 pillars are just a representative. They weren't necessarily written, although we like to think of they're written, because when we read in the book of Joshua, what happens then? Anybody remember? When Joshua and the tribes of Israel finally cross over the Jordan, Joshua sets up these 12 pillars, and he writes it out in in clear letters, which was interpreted as not only wrote in Hebrew, but wrote them in translation so that people could understand them no matter what their language. Anyway, so that's a good one to want to parse, Jerry. What other things that you guys go, wow, we got to look at this? Go ahead, Barbara.
The thing, I was listening to what Margie was saying about the blood, and I'm thinking, did he throw blood on the people because they were to be blood brothers? I don't know. Or, I mean, blood, to me, it's kind of gross, but that's, a modern interpretation. And to think that could be the blood of Adonai, he's not supposed to, it's not a person.
Right. No, it's not remember they sacrificed these animals.
Right.
From the animals, it goes into basins. Now, confession, I thought that was such a typical section of Torah, because from what we're going to get to next is the book of Leviticus, in which we do this all the time, in which the consecration or ordination ceremony is that Moses will take some of the blood of the sacrifice and put it on the earlobe and on the thumb and on the toe of those that are being consecrated, literally mishicha, those who are going to be anointed and ordained. So that there was a use of that blood for a consecration period. We also had the use of blood just a couple of chapters earlier, and we painted them on the doorposts and the lintels of our homes, right? So the use of blood, I thought, okay, that makes sense to me. But for you go, really? That's a strange thing. So good. But we're going to probably have to wait until we get to Leviticus to focus on that. But thank you for reminding me that not everyone thinks it is perfectly normal for blood to be splattered on people as a consecration rite. Okay. So what else?
Well, the sapphire sidewalk, really, I think visualizes some sort of beautiful experience that they were having together.
Beautiful. That's really wonderful. Thank you. Arnie, you had one too.
Well, just one question. When it says he then took the record of the covenant, is that what he wrote on the pillars? I mean, it implies there's something, and then he stood up in front of it and read it.
Right. That's so perfect. And we're going to read some of the commentary. They're trying to figure that out too. What exactly was written? And there'll be those who will say, oh, he wrote the entire Torah. And some will say, no, he wrote the Torah up to this part, right? And some say, no, he wrote all the Torah plus some commentary. So, I mean, there's all kinds of interpretations there. But again, remember last week for the Ten Commandments, the idea was we should stand up as we hear them read, as if we were receiving them. But our ancestors, as they've been reading this for thousands of years, they're wrestling with this text just as we are as well. And it is a little bit of a mishmash. David, go ahead.
Yeah. In terms of sprinkling the blood, we shouldn't think about blood in its the fact that it's part of plasma and whatnot. He has these sacrifices, and he wants somehow to involve the group in front of him, and they have taken this sacrifice. The blood is an easy way to link up the sacrifice, Moses, and the people. He could have, in principle, he could have taken dust and from the sacrifice, but the blood is there's a lot of blood given you just slaughtered the animal, and it's an easier way to just link the people and really make them connected to the sense of, look, God has done this. We've just slaughtered some animals in honor of God. You're now part of the covenant. You are just immersed in it. And there's some small link to the fact that when somebody converts to Judaism, that one of the time-honored traditions is going to a mikvah, that you immerse yourself in it. It's found in parts of Christianity where they have a baptism for the child when the child is officially named and so forth. So it's a sense of connecting the people there with God, with the holiness. You're now part of the group.
Very good. I like that very much. But also with the conversion, there's the hatafat dam brit. There's that drop of blood. And then again, I don't want to go down this connection, but there is one. And Janet, we'll get to you right next. In Catholic rite, although we don't have a consumption in this passage of that blood, there is a consumption of that blood and that flesh, connecting the worshiper in the Mass to Jesus. Go ahead, Janet, and then Margie.
It seems like we want to say that God isn't human, that he doesn't have human attributes. It's something beyond. He's different. He's part of us. And yet, and where the confusion seems to come in on this part is that we give him skills that we as humans can understand. And maybe that's where the confusion comes in. God doesn't have to do any of those things that we have to do to remember, to write, to create, because God is different.
Right. That's so beautiful. On Thursday, we're going to look at some passages from the Morah Debuchim, the Guide for the Perplexed, on the phenomena of revelation. Of course, we're not going to exhaust that topic. Again, you can have doctoral dissertations studying it, but I wanted to share some of the Rambam's take on it. And you're exactly right, Janet. One of the things he wrestles with and tries to teach us is to say, look, we have no option other than to ascribe to God certain human characteristics, human actions, because that's the way we talk about the world. That's our understanding of the world. So it's hard for us to use any terms that are not related to our experience, but we should not take them literally. And so thank you for bringing that up. And Rabbi, it's always wonderful to hear from you. Let me get to Margie and then back to you, Rabbi, okay?
Actually, I was going to make a Catholic connection too. went to Catholic school and had lots of sprinkling of holy water. But this is the first time with Rabbi Zucker saying it, then I'm thinking, oh, that's what it was supposed to do. I never understood it.
And Margie, the fact of the matter is that in principle, they could have sprinkled holy blood, but that.
Well, they had changed it to the transubstantiation, I think.
Right. Well,
That was the wine.
The point is that
Wine to the
drinking water is acceptable. But what Janet brings up is we anthropomorphize God.
Mhm.
And as Rabbi said, we only have human language. We're limited by that. And so we understand that we say God is doing this. We speak about God's hand. We speak about God's wings protecting us and so forth. So we understand that we're limited by human language, and God is beyond human language, but we're limited.
Yeah, it's wonderful. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more on Thursday. So I hope you tune in. So let me get back to some of the commentary. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, Mark, you wanted to share also?
Well, there's just a thing in psychiatry called synesthesia, where your senses are switched. So you'll hear things that you can see and see things that you can smell and things like that. And so that could be, and that happens if you're under the influence of the right chemicals. And you could actually see how they would be confused about that.
What's the name of
synesthesia?
Synesthesia, like the senses are
switched.
Very interesting. Thank you. Now, would that be induced by a hallucinogenic or by a psychosis?
Both.
Yeah, there are people. There's a guy, I forget his name. I remember watching a YouTube video of an interview of his a while ago. He's like a memory champion, and he's a math prodigy, and he has synesthesia. He says that when he hears a number, it has a color, it has a texture, and so math is very interesting to him, because when he multiplies numbers, it's like combining their so yeah, he just walks around in the world with synesthesia. But yes, it's also, I'm sure, an element of psychedelics and things like that too, but in his brain it's just always, and he really can, a number is like a mixing all of these senses. It has a texture and a color and a shape, and he'll say, oh, this number is a very strong, tall, green, so it's kind of a cool synesthesia. Forget the guy's name.
Yeah, I have that too. Numbers have, and letters for me have colors, and they also have ages and sexes. So for instance, 4 is orange and a woman. 5 is kind of gunmetal blue, and it's a male. And I can get their ages, and 1, 2, and 3 are babies. So yeah, I've always had that, and letters too.
Very cool.
I just thought everyone felt that way.
No, although math always caused fear and loathing for me, but that's a different story.
And I'm colorblind, so forget about it.
All right, let's get back to our text. So lots of commentary here. So I wanted to focus on the first. Rashi just makes it simple. I mean, he sort of points out what we mentioned at the very beginning, that this section was spoken before the 10 Commandments were given. And it was the 4th of Sivan. Now, what they're going to be playing with, and I'm going to have a long quote here from the Talmud, which he makes reference to, is that, wait a minute, we have the festival of Shavuot, which is Zman Natan Toratenu, the time of the giving of the Torah, and that's on the 6th day of Sivan. But it seems like this text says that he got it on the 7th day of Sivan. So they're going back and forth on this, right? And so I have this passage from Talmud. It's somewhat extensive, but I think it's pretty awesome. And the reason I think it's awesome is because it shows that our ancestors, as they're wrestling with it, they were sort of confused too, and they were going back and forth with it. So it's cool. So who would like to read this passage from Talmud? I know, Arnie, you got to give us, because Arnie's getting into our Talmud here. Where are you, buddy?
Doesn't hear you.
Okay, I'm here.
Okay.
Come and hear from that which was taught, that Rabbi Yossi says, on the second day of Sivan, Moses ascended Mount Sinai and descended. On the third day, he ascended and descended. Fourth day, he descended and did not ascend Mount Sinai again until he was commanded along with all of the Jewish people. The Gemara asked, how is it possible that he descended on the fourth day? Since he did not ascend, from where did he descend? Rather, this must be amended. On the fourth day, he ascended and descended. Fifth day, he built an altar and sacrificed an offering. On the sixth day, he had no time. The Gemara asks, is that not because he received the Torah on the sixth day of the month?
Okay, hold on, because that's Shavuot. We're going to get to that. But remember, they're trying to figure out, wait a minute. We had him getting the commandments and then coming down and then writing them and going back up and telling the people to come up with us. Now there's the elders just come up with you. And now just you and Joshua coming up and they're trying to figure this out. They're reading this text and they're saying, well, how's this working? Okay. So the Gemara asks the question, shouldn't it be, did he come up on the sixth day to get the Torah, which is Shavuot? Go ahead.
Apparently, this Baraita supports the opinion of the rabbis. The Gemara rejects this. No, he had no time due to the burden of preparing for Shabbat. The Gemara adds, the Galilean taught, while standing above Rav Chisda, blessed is the all-merciful one, he gave the threefold Torah, prophets, and writings, to the threefold nation, priests, Levites, and Israelites, by means of a third born, Moses, who followed Aaron and Miriam in birth order, on the third day of the separation of men and women, in the third month, Sivan. On whose opinion is this homily based? It is based on the opinion of the rabbis who hold that the Torah was given on the third day of separation and not on the fourth day. Rabbi Elazar says, the Jewish people accorded precedence to the declaration, we will do, over, we will hear, a divine voice emerged and said to them, who revealed to my children this secret that the ministering angels use? As it is written, bless the Lord, you angels of his, you mighty in strength, and fulfill his word, hearkening unto the voice of his word.
I.e., you fulfill it before you even heard it. You are willing to obey before you even understand. So as the angels said that, so too now in our text, it says, all that God has spoken, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do, and then it says v'nishma, we will hear.
First, the angels fulfill his word, and then afterward they hearken. Rabbi Chama, son of Rabbi Hanina, said, what is the meaning of that which is written? As an apple tree among the trees of the wood, so is my beloved among the sons. Under its shadow I delighted to sit, and its fruit was sweet to my taste. Why were the Jewish people likened to an apple tree? It is to tell you that just as this apple tree, its fruit grows before its leaves, so too the Jewish people accorded precedence to we will do, over we will hear.
Now hold on for a second. How could they possibly say that the apples grow before the leaves? Who's had an apple tree before? Unplug, okay? So that's not exactly true, but it is true. Look out, we have apple trees back here, and most of fruit trees. What appears first on the branches?
The buds.
The buds, exactly. The buds do. And so from the buds, then that's the first sign of the fruit. Only afterward do the leaves grow in full splendor. So I thought that was very interesting. So now continues. Go ahead, Arnie. One last little piece.
The Gemara relates that a heretic saw that Rava was immersed in studying halakha, and his fingers were beneath his leg, and he was squeezing them, and his fingers were spurting blood. Rava did not notice that he was bleeding because he was engrossed in study. The heretic said to Rava, you impulsive nation who accorded precedence to your mouths over your ears. You still bear your impulsiveness. You act without thinking. You should listen first. Then if you are capable of fulfilling the command, accept them. And if not, do not accept them. He said to him, about us who proceed wholeheartedly and with integrity, it is written, the integrity of the upright will guide them. Whereas about those people who walk in deceit, it is written at the end of the same verse, perseverance of the perseverance of the faithful will destroy them.
Right. So the heretic was making fun of Israel for saying, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and then we will hear, saying that makes no sense. You should understand it first before you do it. But, and this is an analogy that I'm working on, so help me out with it. When you gave this ring, when you received this ring, right? And you say, I do. Right, I do, not I say, we will do, right? But you're a newlywed. You may be a teenager. My parents were married when they were teenagers. Nowadays, people waiting a little bit longer. Susan, I was already 31, 32 when I got married. And Susie was younger. So, but when you said I do, how many really understood what the hell that meant? Right? You didn't understand it. I love this person and I'm committed to this person and we're going to live and we have all these fantasies and like this, but you don't really know what that means. Right?
Until this last year.
It took a while. But that's it, right? And the quote then from Shir Shirim, which is so perfect because it draws the analogy of this love between two lovers, the committing to each other, even knowing that we have the unknown coming. I know that there's the unknown. I know what I don't know, or I don't know what I don't know, and it doesn't matter because I love you, and that's enough. And that's the same with God and all the rest. I thought it was a perfect analogy. Go ahead, Arnie.
I mean, the problem is the weakness in the analogy is you are told what you're saying I do.
You're what?
Granted, you're not. You are told. I mean, do you, Rabbi Rheins, take so and so? You see what I'm saying? To love and etc. That do you part? Then you say I do.
Yeah, but that's the ceremony. First of all,
okay, all right.
That's the ceremony. When you are actually coming together, you are sanctified to me. What the heck does that mean when you're saying that to your bride or to your groom, right? What does that mean when I'm saying, will you marry me? I don't know what that means. I'm a young person and I'm getting married and I don't know what that means.
Well, I think one way out of the problem is that Shema can mean hear, and that's the most common translation, but it really means understand, or can mean understand in any circumstances. So I'm doing it, and then I will gain an understanding. And just using this excellent image of marriage, I would propose the following. The day that you get married, you're married. The next day, you're married. After you've been married 5 years, I'm telling you, you're married a lot more. And after 10 years, you're even more married, and you have a deeper understanding of what it means to be married. And Rabbi is absolutely correct when you say, I do, you're basically doing a leap of faith.
Mm-hmm.
What does 50 years mean?
Very married indeed, I can tell you, from experience.
I love it because what you and Mark have and what we pray to have, and it doesn't always happen. We know that marriages don't always work out, but when you have a couple and they say, you know what, I'm more in love now than I ever was, right? It makes no sense on the level of the romance and the passion, and right, but it makes every sense in the world to say this person is no longer objectified. This person is totally assimilated into who I identify with and who I care about with everything I've got. And it's a beauty. And at a certain level, you don't even have to talk, man. You just look at this person, or more accurately, you're getting looked at and you go, oops.
I mean, if you think about the example of somebody going to college, four-year college, the day they enroll in college, they're a college person. 4 years later, just before they graduate, they're still a college person, but they're so much more understanding of what it means to be a college person. So life grows on us.
Yeah, I love it. Good. Margie, why don't you, and then we'll get back to our text.
It works religiously for me, kind of like the Sapphire Sidewalk. You have to have this experience, and that becomes an act of faith. And then you understand. It doesn't work in other situations for me.
Yeah.
So, it's not something that you could just, it's not a lens you could apply to every situation.
Absolutely not. No, you're 100% correct. I love that. So let's get back. And Margie, if you don't mind, we'll get another larger section. Moses wrote all these, and Moses was trying to also, Rashi was dealing with the same concept. What exactly did Moses write? And we talked about that a little bit earlier. And from Rashi's point of view, well, he wrote from Bereshit, from Genesis, all the way up to Morah, to the time of the waters of bitterness. So Chizkuni focused on why the young men of Israel. There's a couple of others here. They were young lads on the threshold of becoming age when they would become eligible to observe the commandments, i.e. they were becoming bar mitzvah, right? According to a different view, these were all the firstborns of the respective families. There's another tradition which I thought was really lovely too, and that is that the young people were given this responsibility because all of it was for the young people. Many of you have heard that wonderful midrash when God said, "Okay, Moses, I'm going to give you the revelation, but I don't know that this generation is worthy of it." And Moses said, "Well, give it to us because of Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, and Rebecca, Jacob, Rachel, and Leah. Give it to us for the matriarchs and patriarchs." And God said, "Well, they were very, very important, but just because they had the zechut, they had this merit, that's not enough for me to entrust this to you." And he presents a couple of other ideas of what the Israelites did or whatever. And God says, "Well, that's significant, that's wonderful, but that's not enough," right? So finally, Moses says, "Amonata Yiladim." No, sorry guys, hold on. It's Las Vegas calling.
Call from.
I have to tell him Elvis is not in the house. All right.
I was going to ask if you bet on the Super Bowl.
Right. So he says, "Well, because our guarantees, our judge us worthy because of the children." And God then says, "Yes, that's it. As long as you fulfill that mitzvah, vishinantam levanecha, you involve the children, you nurture and encourage and empower the children, then you are worthy of having this revelation." So it's a little line that I thought was really rich with possibilities. Now, we're going to get to this next thing. This is the key passage that I always felt was so weird, that under God's feet, there was a likeness of the pavement of sapphire, like the very sky for purity. Now, Chizkuni, like just about all the other commentators, see this as a prophetic vision, that this was not something that they literally saw God, because you can't literally see God, but you can have an impression of a vision of God in a dream. So this is what the Talmud has, and it's taking off on the concept of the Techelet. And what who could remind me what Techelet is?
It's on the
Tzitzit.
Right, on the tzitzit, right.
tzitzit.
Right. Now, some of us have on our tzitzit, when we have our talit on the four corners are the fringes. Some of us have a patil techelet, a thread of blue. So what kind of blue is it? Techelet, we'll talk about that, and the Talmud will go on and on and on and on, which I didn't focus on, but it's comparing the blue sapphire image to that which we put on our talis, i.e. when we are to Uritim va'asitim et kol mitzvot Adonai, I should look at the Petil Techelet, at the threads of blue, and remember and then do all of the commandments. Who would like to read this from the Talmud, Chulin 89a?
I will.
Thank you, Margie.
What is the benefit imparted by the thread of sky blue wool to Chelet? The Gemara answers, as it is taught in a Baraita that Rabbi Meir would say, what is different about sky blue from all the other colors, such that it was specified for the mitzvah of ritual fringes? It is because sky blue dye is similar in its color to the sea, and the sea is similar to the sky, and the sky is similar to the sapphire stone, and the sapphire stone is similar to the throne of glory, as it is stated. And they saw the God of Israel, and there was under his feet like of a paved work of sapphire stone, and the like of the very heaven for clearness. This verse shows that the heavens are similar to sapphire, and it is written, and above the firmament that was over their heads was the likeness of a throne, as the appearance of a sapphire stone. Therefore, the throne is similar to the heavens. The color of sky blue dye acts as an indication of the bond between the Jewish people and the divine presence.
Right. So on one hand, the commentators are all saying, and I can read this long passage from Nachmanides Rambam, who also looks at it and says, it's a Kabbalistic expression. It's a mystical understanding. You're not looking at God, but you're seeing a vision of, as Onkelos has it. Onkelos is the Aramaic translation of this passage. He says, "The Chezu Yikar D'Adonai," that it's a vision of God, that you saw of a chazu chadan, that you saw the glory of God, but not God personally, right? And so to move from that image, that you're not seeing a thing, but you're seeing, what does glory look like, right? You're seeing an impression. You're seeing some kind of emanation of power, of light, of hope, of whatever, but nothing that you can hold on to, nothing tangible, nothing really can describe other than sapphire-like, heaven-like, blue-ish. And the Talmudic rabbis go on and on about what exactly do they mean by techelet. And there's differences of opinion. Everyone's from indigo to something a little bit more purplish to all the way to Rambam thinks it's much more light sky blue. Because he focuses more on the tahor, that it's clear. So it's blue-ish, clear with a blue tint, right? It doesn't matter exactly what it looked like, but it was reflective of that which we can possess in our hand, but at the same time, not feel that we can totally get a hold of it. We hold the tzitzit in our hands as we say the Shema, and we think of that oneness, we think of that connection with God, knowing that I can't see God and I can't describe God in perfect ways. So it's a text that is perplexing and exciting, but as we go forward, there's another commentary or two that I'm going to bring. I wanted to get some of your reaction.
Is that why the colors on the Israeli flag are blue and white?
Yes, in that the blue and the white, kachov lavan, that I should look at them and see, and I have the blue thread in the midst of the white wool threads to look at that. The pattern, of course, is of the crossing of the Sea of Reeds with the children of Israel in between these the blue. So the blue is of the sea, the blue is of the sky, the blue is of the Techelet. So yes, very good. Now, up until recently, we didn't have in the modern world, we didn't have blue fringes, but we'll get to that at some point later on. But again, as Onkelos, the Aramaic translation, that what they saw was the Yika Elah, that they saw the glory of God. They didn't see God. They saw something that gave them the impression of it. And I think that's the hope when you look at the blue Techelet, is to acknowledge that there's something that goes beyond us. Anyway, please, Margie.
Well, it's the word that keeps coming to me instead of seeing is feeling, so that we get to feel what our ancestors felt at that moment, what their understanding of God is, which isn't sight, but something that reminds them of the experience that they had.
I love that. That's very, very good. That's very, very good. Anyone else? Let's get to some of our other. I'm sorry, Barbara, please.
I keep going back to thinking about visions, and of course, growing up in the 60s and whatever, we won't go there. Anyway, but visions are so subjective. So when we talk about the different shades of blue that different people are feeling or seeing, it is in keeping with, I believe, with visions, that it's such a subjective thing.
I agree. And then when we try to describe it, or can you describe a taste? We have sweet and sour, but salty, tangy.
Right.
How can you describe a taste really accurately? You can't. This taste.
Everyone's different.
Right. Exactly. Very good. Let's get back to some of these other commentaries. Here's Rashi on what they saw. Anybody would like to read this piece from Rashi?
I'll read.
Thank you, Barbara.
Now they gazed intently, and failing in this, they peeped into their attempt to catch a glimpse of the Supreme Being, and thereby made themselves liable to death. It was only because God did not wish to disturb the joy of the giving of the Torah, and he did not punish them instantly, but waited for Nadab and Abihu until the day when the tabernacle was dedicated, when they were stricken with death, and for the elders until the event of which the text relates. And when the people complained, and the fire of the Lord burned among them and destroyed those who were the nobles of the camp. What does that mean? Okay, so in the book of Numbers, we will have the passage in which Nadab and Abihu, at the very time in which their father Aaron, now Nadab and Abihu went up with their father Aaron and their uncle Moses for some of these revelatory experiences. At the ordination, on the 8th day of ordination, when Aaron and Moses came out and they raised their hands in blessings to the children of Israel, it said that Nadab and Abihu came in and offered strange fire to on the altar. And it says the fire of the Lord burst out. There was some kind of accident. Don't forget, we're talking about an altar with fire, and there's fat. Obviously, you know what it is when you put something on boiling or superheated fat. It's sometimes it's explosive, right? And they died. They got burned up, and it was like, no, they can't. They were doing a good thing. Weren't they doing a good thing? And then it says, well, they weren't really supposed to be there. They were supposed to be out at the party celebrating their daddy. And instead, they were offering this offer. Why were they doing that? And so here's Rashi bringing back a midrash, understanding that at this time of seeing God, they weren't, even Moses, remember, he averted his eyes, and when God said at the burning bush, take off your shoes, this is holy ground, and Moses averted his eyes, I don't want to see this, right? But they didn't. They took a peek.
They wanted to see, what is this dude, right? Who is this, you know? And there's a comeuppance there. And so not only did they ultimately pay the penalty, so that's their take on it, that they should have gotten burned up at the time because you don't look at God. There's nothing to, now on one hand we say, well, there's nothing to look at, but what happens when you try to look at it? I know I'm going far afield here. There's a very important midrash in the Talmud called the Pardes, in which Akiba and Acher and they go into this Pardes and they're trying to connect with God. They're trying to have an absolute connection with an experience of God. And one of them dies right away. One of them goes crazy. One of them becomes a heretic, that's Acher, and one of them, Akiba, he survives. So they said, don't do that, right? This is not a good thing to try to comprehend God. Na'aseh v'nishma, just obey, just do. Don't try to comprehend God. If you delve too much in, and the rabbis are very clear about this, if you delve too much into philosophy, into the theological underpinnings of what God is or isn't, it can lead you astray. It can drive you crazy.
And if you think about when we rear children, that with young children we teach them what to do, and they follow what their parents say, and only later do they really understand. For instance, don't go out don't play in the traffic. You teach the child, don't do that because it's dangerous, but child doesn't understand what dangerous means. So you do, and then in time you gain understanding.
Right. Or my worst example is when mom kept saying, don't touch the iron because it's hot. Who touched the iron? I know a couple of us did, right? I had to touch it. And guess what happened? Mommy was right. So a couple more.
Just to make sure she was telling the truth.
Yeah, she was. God help her. Okay, I want to get this little bit from the Guide to the Perplexed, which I think is terrific. Is it too long? No, it's not too long. And we'll stop with this because we're going to get a little bit more of Rambam later on. Who would like to read from Rambam?
I'll read it.
Thank you, Jerry.
In the passage, Exodus 24:10, and there was under his feet, like the action of the whiteness of a sapphire stone, Ankylos.
Ankylos, that's the Aramaic translation.
Ankylos, as you know, in his version, considers the word raglav, his feet, as a figurative expression and a substitute for throne. The words under his feet, he therefore paraphrases, and under the throne of his glory. Consider this well, and you will observe with wonder how Ankylos keeps free from the idea of the corporeal reality of God, and from everything that leads thereto, even the remotest degree, for he does not say, and under his throne. The direct relation of the throne to God implied the literal sense of the phrase, his throne, would necessarily suggest the idea that God is supported by a material object and thus lead directly to corporeality of God. He therefore refers the throne to his glory. In other words, the Shekinah, which is a light created for the purpose.
Good. So this passage, all the commentators are saying you have to take this as allegorical. And when we're going to look at on Thursday with Rambam, he thinks, with the exception of some of the specific laws that we have, much of the Torah should be read in that metaphorical way, that you can't read it literally or you'll be totally turned away, turned upside down, and because of the brunt of the teaching was that God is not a thing, right? And we had that from the Ten Commandments on. don't make an image of me of anything in the heavens above or in the seas below or anything below the seas. I'm not a thing, right? And so how can I see the throne of God or the sapphire beneath his feet? As Rambam will emphasize, you have to read this as a metaphor and not as literal. But the tendency is for us to read things literally, especially when it supports an idea that's easily apprehended. So who'd like to, I know some people have raised their hands on this, but I don't want to go much further on this because we're going to follow this up on Thursday. And that was the passage I thought was most startling, this what they saw under God's feet. Go ahead, Barbara. Anyone?
I always think about this concept of God, that in this, I'm digressing. How is Christianity a monotheistic religion? I know this is way out there. When they've made God, a Jesus, into a God.
So again, don't forget, our understanding of Christianity is most often informed by the Western Christian Church, Catholic and Western European Protestant. Some of the Eastern reflection of Orthodox Christianity, and some of the quote unquote heretical sects of early Christianity differentiated a great deal between God the Father and Jesus as a intermediary, and that which linked the two would be the Shekhinah, the Holy Ghost, if you will. So it's not an incompatible understanding. Christianity has such a broad and varied theology from movement to movement over the centuries that it's really impossible to say, okay, this is this is what they believe. Well, who believes? West, East, Protestant, Catholic, fundamentalist, liberal. And so I try not to pin them down onto one or the other, but understanding that even within Judaism, we have some fundamentalists who will try to find expressions that we might find bordering on idolatry or heresy as well. It's not uncommon in certain Haredi circles, for instance, that if something happens bad in a household, someone got in a car accident or someone lost their job or someone got sick, that the rabbi will come and say, you should check the cloth on your mezuzah, right? Take your mezuzah down and see if there's some kind of chipping of the ink in your mezuzah. Really? That's it? That's what happened? God's punishing me because some of my mezuzah was schmutzed. And so, Yoni, come on, you gotta comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, I was just gonna share that I think this is why the movements with staying power focus on practice and not on belief, right? So Orthodox Judaism focuses on keep Shabbat, keep kashrut, pray in this way. Reform Judaism on acts of service, right, with tikkun olam and pursuing justice. And I think if you were to poll a sanctuary in any denomination, you ask people, how do you understand this verse, or how do you understand God, or how do you you're going to segment your community entirely, right? You're going to have the person who says, like me, who's going to say this verse shows that the biblical author believed that God had a body, right? Then you're going to have the person like Rambam who says, no, the Torah has to be the lens through which I read the Torah. It has to match up with philosophical logic. It cannot be nonsensical, right? And then we're going to start fighting, and we're going to open up different synagogues. And then in 5 years, I'm going to read a book that challenges my perspective. And now I'm going to leave the synagogue that I started to join the other guy's synagogue. And he's now moved on to another. And so I think that's, I think that's the, when you wonder how a religion, I knew I could never start a religion that stayed, because I'd get way too out of the concept of practice and way too into philosophy, and it would splinter and break up and fizzle out in a second. And so I think that, when you touch on these questions of knowing God and thinking about God, and is it dangerous to consider the philosophy, it's just not practical. And I think that's the beautiful thing, that, you could probably find a lot of Reform Jews and Orthodox Jews and conservative Jews who actually think of this verse in the same way, but practice very differently. But like that's the, and then you're gonna, again, two Reformed Jews praying next to each other, they're both gonna have a different perspective on it. And if you ask them in 20 years, they'll be different from where they were before. So I think, presenting the verse in the way that you did is a powerful example of how cohesiveness is the glue that keeps people together is practice, not necessarily thought, philosophy, or belief.
Yeah, thank you. But to the issue of Christianity, and maybe we can devote at some point a couple of lunch and learns to it. The medieval rabbis came to a very strong conclusion that this is not avodah zarah. It is not idolatrous. And the question was, if there's a statue or of Jesus or of Mary, and people seem to be venerating it, isn't that idolatry? And they said, no, they are using that as a focus. In some ways, similar to the Petit Techelet. I might look at a thread and they may look at a statue, but neither of them are God itself, but rather ways to direct our prayer. And the most generous expressions I thought was beautiful. It was that Christianity at least can be credited with bringing the whole understanding of monotheism, of the teaching of the Hebrew Bible, to literally billions of people who are not Israelites, who are not descendants from the Israelites. And so to celebrate what they have done, to appreciate what they have done, and to see at what they have done as a brotherly part of our expression of faith, that it's different and it's unique and they have their own ritual, okay, but that they have that core, they have the Hebrew Bible as a part of it. We accept and we appreciate and we celebrate. And so we can see that when they talk about the Abrahamic faiths of Christianity and Islam and of course Judaism, that's what we're talking about. They may have some different rituals and calendar and holidays and theology, but we definitely have so much in common we can appreciate. This is, as always, I love our time together, but unfortunately we're at the end of this hour, and I hope that I can see some of you, if not all, on Thursday as we look at some of these theological pieces with Rambam. I hope to bring, and that's just a matter of how much time we're going to have, some of the pieces from the Reform movement about God and Torah. Sort of complements, if not completes, what we've been talking about the last couple of weeks. And as always, please know that we're here. Give us a call. Let me know if there's things going on. Barbara, I want to give you a shout out again for initiating the lasagna stuff. We are bringing lots of lasagnas to people, and
Yes.
it really helps. So thank you to everyone. Yoni, it's always you're wonderful and awesome, and I look forward to seeing you guys soon.